All right, guys, welcome back to another podcast. This is podcast number 19. And as always, I'm joined by Craig Seaton.
Good evening or afternoon.
What time is it anyway?
Depends what time you're listening to, doesn't it? Morning, afternoon, good night.
Yeah, we're in our beautiful studio in Block. Only a few more weeks before the storm hits, isn't
launch,
it?
Yeah.
It's calm before the storm. We were talking about this before the podcast. I'm using the opportunity right now to spend more time in the studio. I just spend a lot of time on my own, just doing stuff on my own. So yeah, it's been nice, but looking forward to things getting going again. But yeah, how's things been with you?
Things are good, man. Yeah, I've been doing the same really. Just had a very relaxed 2 weeks, which has been nice. Did a little bit of online work for a retreat, so breathwork session. Been out for a few walks, and yeah, it's been lovely. It's been really nice.
Speaking of the retreat, because I miss your half. I think I had a class straight after I finished my class in the morning. How was it anyway?
Great, man. Yeah, really good. Yeah, this one we were focusing on maintenance of high energy. So we had Mickey in the morning talking about how to raise your energy up, vibrationally wise, and what you do with your actions, thoughts, etc. And then I was did a short talk on maintenance of those high levels of energy from the emotional, physical, spiritual, and from the realms of the mind. And then a bit of breath work to help with those practices to generate the energy, generate the breath, and to maintain. Yeah.
And how many people were there when you were doing it?
I'm not sure. I didn't check the numbers for this one. I've not checked them yet.
Yeah, I think when...
How was it in the morning?
It was really good, yeah. I think when Mickey approached me, as usual, I'm always on the dot in terms of time, or I'm a few minutes late, but I managed to luckily get on. I think we had an issue in the morning where I think the link was different. So the link I was given was a different link until Mickey's Mrs. Emma, she messaged me and she said, this is what the new link is. But yeah, it was great. And I think I came on 10 minutes early, so Mickey said, you might as well get 10 minutes extra out of the session. So yeah, and I had a lot of feedback from people saying, the session was good. But I felt as though I went a little too quickly because I remember the last session was only a 50-minute session. So I think I felt as though I rushed it a bit too much in terms of not spending enough time in each of the stretches. And yeah, so I've definitely reflected on that, and I'm hoping to change that for the next one whenever we do that again. I think for the moment, I don't think he's got any plan for the future, has he? I think he's doing his own stuff for a bit.
I'm not sure. I mean, there's been one every month, and we've kind of seen how it goes until lockdown's finished, and then see if it's something people would still be interested in, which I think they would. I've had such a good response from online training or the online retreats. I think it's something that we'll see how it continues to go, and I don't know why it wouldn't still be effective.
Yeah,
it's different knowing that when you've got the option to meet up with people and do it, but still all those different people at that time, and to do it online in convenience in your own home. If you're bringing a product that's helping people and they're getting some enjoyment from it, I think as far as online work goes, keep it going. Yeah,
I think the addition would be to do it in person eventually, and I think people will definitely appreciate it more if it's actually a retreat environment. But like you said, you very much limit yourself in terms of numbers and who you can target, because people will have to book flights to get here. I think airlines have just started opening up the gates for flying as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and we haven't talked for 2 weeks, and I wanted to mention that I was reading Sadhguru's Book of Death, Death, an Inside Story. And yeah, it's just been a really fascinating process for the last 2 or 3 days, and I've really opened up my mind. And one thing he mentioned that really stood out for me in the book was that we approach life and we believe that each person lives a completely different life. Like my lifestyle's different to yours, even though certain parts of our paths have kind of crossed together and we've experienced the same things. We can obviously admit that we live completely different lives. So why can't we die in completely different ways? The approach to death seems to be the same, and the lack of understanding of how to approach death, it comes from a place of insecurity and not understanding what is next beyond this realm. And yeah, his spin on it was really deeply fascinating. And one of the things I really found moving was he spoke about the death of his wife and how she performed this thing. It's known in Eastern traditions, and I think not many Western people know about this, so this will be quite interesting to talk about. It's known as Mahasamadhi. So that basically means the highest level of deep meditation, to the point where you can let go or shed the skin or the body and move on to the next part. And a lot of people that don't have an understanding of it automatically assume that's a form of suicide because you're killing yourself. But he really goes into detail in differentiating between suicide and this mahasamadhi and leaving the body, which is doing it in a way that doesn't harm the body, whereas suicide doesn't matter how you do it, it doesn't matter how peaceful it is. So you might go to, I think the Netherlands allow you to euthanize the body. And that form, again, it's still traumatizing the body, it's hurting the body. So this form of releasing the spirit from the body is in an environment where you have full control of your life energies and you can peacefully just let go. And I think he describes it a few times like swapping out your clothes. So letting go of your old garments, putting on a new garment. Yeah, and I just found it really deeply fascinating how his wife one day decided that I'm done, I'm good. And he was obviously discouraging her from doing it because their daughter was very young. I think their daughter was 7 or 8. And he was like, you know, you're still living a really good life. And she goes, this is why I want to go. I feel as though everyone's good to me, life is great for me. Isn't it not the best time to go right now? And then later on down the line when I'm feeling, you know, not in the environment to go. So yeah, the process of just reading about this, and I remember him briefly mentioning it in a talk, but because obviously the size of the crowd and the type of people that were there, it's very difficult for him to talk about certain topics because you've got to also understand that there are people sat in the crowd that will not understand what this process is. And death is one of those things that you have to really talk about it in a very, in an environment where, you know, people are not misinterpreting what you're saying. So you're not trying to encourage death in any form in terms of suicide, and that's what most people usually point it down to. You're encouraging people to commit suicide, but it isn't. It's the final point of liberation. It's getting to that liberation point and going back into the place you came from, which is the universe, the higher consciousness. So yeah, I don't know what your interpretation of death is anyway, so let's talk about that.
Just to go over what you're saying there, so what Sadhguru is saying within the book is to get your point of consciousness and awareness as you're ready to leave the body and to die and to go from that point, and that's really ties into my understanding of, through Buddhist understandings of it, is always being conscious where we can. So even in the sleep, going into unconscious aspects of our sleep, we can stay conscious within that. And Tibetan dream yoga is in the preparation for the death. Right. So when they're going to die, similar to what Sadhguru is saying here, is they'll stay conscious. For them, they take in the belief of reincarnation, so they'll be able to reincarnate in the body or also have the opportunity to become a Buddha in the afterlife. Right. So there's elements there when they've died that they can become fully realized before reincarnation occurs. So there's so many elements to increasing their consciousness in the areas that they are unconscious on. So many benefits for training the self to get to that state. They'll spend their whole life in practice of being able to keep that consciousness sharp from the transition over. Yeah, personally, I find death fascinating. You know, I find it a really interesting subject. Really, what's the word? I mean, I think there's liberation in death, regardless of whatever look you have on it. There will be a liberation. I suppose it's only seen on the side of fears that no, I want to stay here. So you'll anchor yourself down and I'm not dying, I'm going to stay here. And then see it just as a negative thing, which I wonder if the general consensus of that is changing more. Maybe not, maybe because I've invested so much thought and research into it that it's hard for me to see it any other way from it being just the next point of spiritual life, of changing over, whatever happens. I don't know what happens, I just go for what I believe or what my experience will put together. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm happy it's happening. I'm not in a rush, but knowing that there's always this one mystery left, which you will get an answer from, which you can't ignore, it is going to happen. And I like that. I like knowing that there's going to be one mystery left for me to explore, and you get it at the very end. It's like on your birthday or Christmas or whatever you celebrate, having a gift like 1 minute before your birthday is nearly over. It's like, oh, here you go. It's like, oh wow, extra bonus. There's a mystery, unravel it. But I also understand that might just be my personal point of view towards death. Because I just don't think anything with the level of consciousness or energy that a human has, you watch how nature functions and its continuous cycles of renewing the energy again and again. How can our consciousness, our awareness not be somewhere else? Even if there's no internal memory or memory that's being recorded, however memory is recorded, you're just fresh, completely fresh again in a new experience. Like,
yeah.
If you can have a peak of life, wouldn't it, to be continue to explore itself in so many different ways, to continue growing and exploring. And I was watching something last night, and it was about space. It's a bit of a sci-fi film, and just watching how life can spread out from our planet, what it took to get to spaceships, what it took to get to the moon, then to Mars, and then, you know, eventually 50 years, 100 years, we'll be seeding the whole galaxy. Like, life will continue to grow, even if we're here momentarily or briefly to experience it. I just don't ever feel that that is the end, maybe that individual experience, but like Alan Watts says, you can't have an experience of nothing. So you're either not having an experience or you are, and that's it. That's it.
Yeah, I think touching on what you just said, and then the reaction I had, and the reaction that most people would have normally, is the fact that you say you're looking forward to death. It's almost misconstrued to the point of you almost wanting, you know, it's almost suicidal if you look at it in a way that's logical and use your mind to it. But if you don't understand death, and that's one thing we don't really understand as a culture, you know, we've created amazing things. We've created these technologies that have allowed us to go into space and travel around and stuff. Yet the one thing that you can't even talk about at your dinner table with your family, death. I remember when you were a kid, anything you talk about in terms of any topic you brought up in terms of death will get completely shut down. Why are you talking about death? Why are you bringing this in? Why are you wishing death on anyone? All these kind of things, and it's still deeply ingrained in us today. And one thing I've noticed when I was studying animals back in university was that we're the only animal, if you want to call human beings the animal, we're the only animal that wants to put off death as much as possible. And we kind of misinterpret that as being a survival mechanism. It is a survival mechanism to hold on to life as much as possible, but that moment of death, when it comes, most animals will prepare for that. So, for example, the one that Sadhguru mainly relates to and talks about is the snake or the cobra. The cobra, when it knows that it's dying, he'll know 6 months or 8 months in advance that he's going to die. So what he does is he places himself in an environment, usually on top of a high tree, calls himself up, and then waits for death to come. He stops eating, so he gradually reduces the amount of food that he's consuming, because there's no point, because the best thing you can do is die on an empty stomach, and he waits for death to come for him. And then when death does come, he goes peacefully, whereas there generally tends to be a struggle, and especially since it's also the fact that people don't want to let go of their loved ones, and it's again, it's chicken and egg situation. When you can't let go of your loved ones, is it because you are scared of what happens after death? You know, are you going to lose that person? And through that, we tend to create insecurity, and we don't want to let go of things. But he talks about death being compared to it's actually not the fear of death, it's the fear of not living. So he says, he's got a really good example that I literally just read it before we got here in the chapter. He says, if I was to loan you £1 million and I expect that £1 million back in 10 years' time, now in that 10-year period, if you were able to capitalize on that million and make maybe 100 million or $1 billion, when I come to you in 10 years' time, you would gladly open your doors up for me. You know, I'll come in your house, you'll probably make me some food, and you'll gladly give the $1 million back and say, thank you for your $1 million. You know, I used it and I managed to make this much money off it, so I'm really glad that you lent me that. And if you're feeling generous, you might give me a bit more. Whereas if I come to you and you've squandered that $1 million in the 10-year period and you've just wasted it, when I come to collect that $1 million, you'll be hiding. It's almost like I'm dead now. It's more terrifying for you to confront me as opposed to you confronting death. So that's why a lot of people generally tend to end up committing suicide when there are loan sharks after them. And it's because, again, I think he mentions that fear is what we're really scared of. It's not death itself, it's the fear that, you know, the person you are, the person you thought you were, is going to be gone. And there's nothing you can do to take that with you. And it's the one thing that is guaranteed. So, you know, you might live a life that's pretty shit and you don't do anything in your life and you get nowhere. But one thing that will come, you know, will always come for you is death. Whereas comparing that to a person that it makes their life full of joy and does things to serve other people, knows that when he's going to die, it's he doesn't feel empty. He doesn't feel as though that he's not achieved anything and he's not done anything to give to the world. And it's usually at death's door that most people realize that actually I've wasted my life, or actually I've done enough and I'm ready to go. So that comparison with the loan shark or the loan person lending you the money is a great comparison. It's something that's deeply within us, that we feel as though we feel like we haven't satisfied or we haven't utilized our capacity to live in the life that we created. So yeah, I found that really interesting that he was talking about this, and it's something that we all relate to. But he said that fear is actually not psychological. Fear is physiological, because it's a fear. You're scared that you're going to get hurt more than anything else. So let's say if you're at the edge of a cliff, the fear of falling isn't the fear of falling itself. The fear is there because you're scared that by you falling, you're going to end up hurting yourself. And he describes death as being painless. The process of dying, so you might die being shot in the head, that might be painful, and you might bleed out. That's obviously going to be painful. Or you might break your bones jumping out of a plane or something, and the parachute might not open. But the process from transitioning from being alive to dying, that process will be very peaceful. And it's something that we don't usually see. We tend to think a person that dies at an old age, surrounded by his family, on a bed in hospital, is dying a peaceful death. And it can be the opposite. In that scenario, that person might not be wanting to let go because he's around all his family, whereas someone who's immediately been killed or has come across a tragedy and has died in that process, you might think on the exterior that, oh God, he's broken all of his bones from the fall or whatever he's done, but he might have gone through the death in a more peaceful manner. So yeah, it's just really deeply fascinating, and I didn't realize how deep Eastern philosophy was about talking about death openly, whereas in the modern generation, even my parents, we would never talk about death, because it's almost as though you're cursing or you're asking death to come upon you or someone else that you're talking about. So yeah, I find that process really interesting, and I think all religions have suffered the same problem, where it's become a massive taboo. So much so that it's more of a taboo to talk about death than it is to talk about sex. And that's happened for the last, God knows, since religion became a big thing.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it? The whole ignorance towards death, and to be afraid of it and to not talk about it other than in pain or trauma or something to fear. And I think you can understand somebody's level of maturity on a wide scale if they've respected and looked at something like death without the base and obvious and maybe immature fear that we have instantly to death. Because why are we clinging on so much? Using some of those examples you've suggested, why would we cling so much to who I am, or to not being hurt, or to not being here tomorrow? Or is it because the loved ones go away? All these little different reasons, and what is the one underlying reason beyond it? Is there something beyond all of those small things? Is it just a lack of existence or waste of time, that we fear that we've wasted our time? And once you put it into check and accepted that you have a limited amount of time on this planet to be alive, would you not use it better knowing that, never taking that for granted, and accepting that I will die at a certain point, and I'll do my best not to miss out anything along the way. Probably much easier said than done. But I know with how I feel towards death, and yeah, to put it into context, what you were saying before is I love being alive. I love my life. I'm in no rush to die whatsoever. There's still so much to explore and be a part of in everyday life. But as I was saying before, that one mystery left is kind of something left to unwrap at the very end of life. It's like, wow, great. And maybe that's just a particular interest and fascination of life that will give me that ability to look forward to it, or not, at least not push it away, not resist it. Because it's easy to say these things until you're actually dying, until how it feels. Doing some of the plant medicines can literally feel like you're dying. The DMT experiences can feel like you're being, not just the physical sensation, but what it actually means to die, is to let go of so many layers of character and personality, and what we can experience through meditation or working on with deep, for me at least, the Eastern religions and what they teach about death and letting go of the layers. But the experience and the feeling of it from what the only way I could link it to would be the psychedelic experience, specifically DMT, and that just pulling away. How can we prepare ourselves for something so great? You know, if we're not able to let go of little things in our life, and we're not able to let go of the insecurities, or this person said this, or that's going on over there, or should I do this or should I do that? Like all these little things that we weigh ourselves down with. And maybe that's just distraction as well. You know, maybe that's not to face once you get all right with death. You may be all right with so many other things in your life, especially impermanence, because it's happening all the time. And bringing in and acknowledging your own impermanence is so freeing. Because you can either look at it from a state of, I'm worried about everything, I'm going to die, this is going to end, I don't want that to happen, I want to leave my mark, I want people to be known that I'm here, or I want other people to be okay in their lives. Like, there's just so much continuous weight and stress that you won't find a moment's peace. And when we step back and we see the temperance and to just live compassionately or truly as we can, simple recipe for life in my eyes, maybe not simple to pull off.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's understanding that in this entire universe, or your place in this universe, you're just a small blip. You've just turned up, and you're going to pop out just as quickly as you've turned up. And if you accept that reality, that that's what you are, then the whole process of living becomes, you don't take everything too seriously. You don't take yourself too seriously. You don't take when other people do things to you too seriously as well. You know, and yeah, I think that's something that we really struggle to come to terms with. And maybe this is why one of the reasons why mental health is a huge problem these days is because we're not willing to accept that we're this tiny little thing that's happening, and we're not willing to let go of that as well. And I think we mentioned it in a few podcasts ago. I think it might have been the last one that we did, when we talked about when you're in nature and you look up at the sky and you see all of the stars and you see the rest of the galaxy, especially in a place where there's very little pollution, you can really understand and get a context of who you are in comparison to the rest of the universe. You know, it's literally in your face, and to realize that, forget you, but the planet itself is just a small little grain in a massive, you know, desert, if you want to call it so. A small little grain of sand in a massive desert. And I think once you've come to terms with that reality, then everything that happens to you it's not that great. I mean, it's obviously that, looking at it in that way, you can also, you know, almost argue that you're being very pessimistic about life and saying, oh, you don't mean anything and stuff. But having that outlook means that nothing can truly hurt you. You know, when someone does something or says something to you, it's not to you, it's to the exterior that you are looking at. And I don't know where I read this, but it was a very interesting quote. And I don't know who the person was, but I think he might have been a mystic or something. But he did mention that when you have a dead body, that's the only thing you can do with that body. So let's say if you're after someone for, I don't know, murdering your brother or doing something really bad to you, and you literally want to kill them, once you've done the act, that's it. That's the body's just there on the ground, and usually what happens is the person committing the act walks away from that. Once he knows that the body's dead, like when you shoot someone or you've seen the life come out of someone, the only thing you can do is just leave the body. Of, you know, you can't hurt the person any more than you've already done. You've killed the life in that person. So once you've overcome that fear that is the only thing that can happen to me, only sort of, if you want to consider it as a dark thing or only a bad thing, if you want to look at it in that way, or only a good thing. If someone's chasing you, you know, loan sharks are chasing you, or you owe someone something, and they say to you, it's either you owe me this or it's your life. Once they've taken your life, that's the only thing they can take away from you. There's nothing else. You know, you've taken the burden of life off your shoulders when that's happened. And again, this probably sounds insane for our viewers, and it's not an encouragement to go out there killing someone or take someone's life, but it's understanding that the only true thing someone can take from you is your life, nothing else. Like a person can hurt you, but then again, is that you doing it to yourself? You know, so the only thing someone can do directly to you is to take your life. Everything else is all internal. You're the one who's taken that perspective of, this is what hurt means to me. So if you cheat on someone, the person that's been cheated on is taking it personally on themselves that they've been cheated on. So that is the only thing that person can do, is literally kill you, and that's it. Everything else is just something that you're experiencing on the inside, as opposed to being an external factor influencing you, if you know where I'm coming from there. So
yeah, I think it's where you set up that arrangement of what has value and meaning to you. Like, the more that you say, this is a part of my life, the more we will fight for those things, or be upset or hurt if they're not how we see them anymore. And a relationship's a good example, because people make commitments, they make deals effectively with each other, they make a pact. We're going to be together, and a certain set of requirements and rules naturally comes with that. So when in this scenario somebody's cheated on the partner, will rightfully feel betrayed or feel upset or hurt, because their life has been impacted on the sense of a life that's been part of the drama, being played out, our role, our job, and this is something that causes disturbance in that. But ultimately, the life that you live is what you choose and what you hold valuable, and what your actions you want to do, which doesn't mean you won't ever get hurt. It doesn't mean you won't ever find moments of insane joy and love and bewilderment or sadness or grief or pain. Doesn't mean those feelings are any less real. They're part of the human experience, they're part of the drama that we're playing in. But what we deem to define us is what we'll carry around or not, I suppose. Whether that's views of others, views upon ourselves, projections of the past and the future, fears of death, what have I done, or being present in every moment and seeing how you get on living that stance. I think we jump philosophies and different aspects over time as we learn about new things, and you figure out what works best for you. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're just a bit of life. You have that life from a unique experience, and how you allow that to be shaped by the external world is completely in your benefit if you want it to be, or in your deficit if you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's just the great power of the prism of the mind. It will just project out onto it whatever we decide, when we realize we have that power and that ability. And you take that in your waking life, bring that over to your beliefs or understandings of death, or truths of death, whatever we can get closest to, and not even just use it for that, use it to shape your entire life, the way that you think about things and what is valuable, what carries meaning.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I want to talk to you about in regards to death is in regards to this life itself. So when people say that, this person's has drawn the short straw in life and has been given this and that, and they've suffered this and that. A lot of people tend to think that life isn't fair, and that life is just either against you or for someone else all the time. And there's a term called sanchit karma. So there's three types of karma. There's sanchit karma, there's prarabdha karma, and there's what's the final one? Sanchit, prarabdha. I can't remember the final one, but each of them represents a different type of experience that you've taken either from the past, or your kriyaman karma, that's what it's called, the final one, or what you're experiencing right now. So kriyaman is the karma that you're accumulating right now. Whatever actions you're doing right now, you're producing other karma consequences, whether good or bad, for the future and for future births, if you're going to take those future births. But the interesting one is sanchit karma and prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is the karma you've taken from your last life, your last God knows how many lives you've taken, and it's influencing you on this life. So the body you've been given is an accumulation of all the karmas from your past lives, and what all the actions you've taken in the past. It's led you to have this birth. The physical traits that you have, the body that you accumulate right now, is all because of what's happened in the past. So that's prarabdha karma. The sanchit karma is the karma that you've banked. So you have this reserve, almost a bank where the money's been filtered out. So the karma's being filtered out slowly through channels and through experiences, and you're experiencing it in this life and in the future lives as well. So I found that interesting when he was talking about prarabdha karma. The reason why, when people say, why do bad things happen to good people? well, you are first of all, you're basing good and bad based on what society deems as good and bad. And the example that he uses is, at one point, smoking was considered a healthy thing. The doctors would be, for women especially that were pregnant, they would prescribe cigarettes, just to say, to chill out, to feel more ease. I think it was the 1960s or something, 1950s, where doctors would openly prescribe cigarettes especially to pregnant women to relax the body. And now through science and through all the research that we've done, we realize that actually smoking is really bad for you. So again, it's based on where you are in terms of what society you're born in will determine how you feel what is good and right. Good and bad. And I think when he was mentioning the parable of karma, he was saying that when bad things happen to good people, you haven't fully understood the whole concept of what this person has gone through in their past lives. And there's stories in Eastern philosophy where, a monk and his student are walking through the forest, and the student sees, an elephant being eaten alive by ants. And he's wondering, why has this elephant suffered such a deadly fate when an elephant's a very gentle creature? And he says, well, what you don't see is what the person that's accumulating, or the spirit that's accumulated that body, has done in previous lives. You've basically assumed what you've seen in front of you. And that, if you take that context into what we're seeing right now, we are assuming many things around us. We judge our biases and all the prejudices based on what we see, what people are doing, as opposed to taking into consideration all of their actions. And he said the best thing you can do is always look at the positives of a person as opposed to really focusing on the negatives. So the example he uses is the rose tree. The reason why we call it a rose tree is because we focus on the positive aspect of that plant. A rose tree, if anyone has seen a rose tree, has, I think, for every bud of rose, it has 20 or 30 spikes. Yeah, so that one blossom or one bud only comes about when there are 30 to 50 spikes around.
It's incredible.
So instead of calling it a spike tree, why do we call it a rose tree? Well, we're choosing to focus on the beauty of that plant, instead of focusing on the majority of that plant, which is the negative part, which is the part that's going to prick you. So it's looking at life in that way. When you look at someone, and it goes perfectly into what we were talking about 2 podcasts ago about all the riots and stuff. And when people were pulling down the statues of prominent people in the past, again, we've chosen to focus. Suddenly now we turned the whole thing upside down, and we decided to focus on the negatives of the people that we're pulling down, the sort of representation of what their negative traits were, instead of actually focusing on the reason why they were put into a statue and celebrated. Is because of their positive things. So Churchill, for what he did for this country, Gandhi for what he did in terms of his belief for non-violence and what he did for the Indians, and so many other figures in the past. I think someone was saying in America that they should take down George Washington's statue and this and that. And what's that place called with the 4?
Rushmore?
Rushmore. And they were saying we should demolish Rushmore, and we shouldn't have that because of all what those figures did in the past. And again, we're choosing to focus on the negative aspect of what those people represented as opposed to focusing on the positive things they were celebrated for. So yeah, that example of the rose was perfect. And the other one he mentioned was a mango tree. How many, if you just forget about the mango itself, when you have a tree that has fruit basically, you don't focus on the tree being the leaves, the countless number of leaves there are. You focus on the one positive aspect of that tree that you want, which is the fruit. So we call it an apple tree or a mango tree or whatever tree you want to call it. We focus on the aspect that you desire or you want from that tree. So we should be doing the same thing to other human beings and focusing on the positive traits as opposed to being like, this person's cheated on people in the past, and we should focus on that as opposed to focusing on the good things he's done 10, 20 years down the line. So it's acknowledging the whole of experience as one thing as opposed to just saying, oh, in this lifetime that person's going through that, and we should just, we should feel sorry for him, we should feel pity. But that doesn't mean that you don't provide charity, or you don't be charitable towards people that are in dire situations, because at some point you were in that situation in many lives ago. You came out of it because of the actions of the people helping you out. So it's your responsibility as a person, as a soul, to be doing the same thing to people that are on separate paths than you are in life. And that way, in the future lifetimes, they do the same thing, and it's just a cycle paying for itself over and over again.
Yeah, I like the example of the rose tree and the thorn. Even the mango and the tree one's good, but the rose just shows the duality. You know, what we're saying about life and death is we cannot be afraid to look at the opposite side. We have so much resistance and rejection of what the other side likes that no, there can't be any truth in it. It's wrong. Don't go over there. Don't listen to them. Definitely don't read their books. You know, anything like that. When religions reinforce not reading other religious texts, there's always an internal thought that goes, why would I not be allowed to read that other book or learn about those other teachings? You can say things like they're structured from people who want you to continue to stay a certain way and eliminate other things that don't hinder that. That do hinder that. I know there's yogis in India that recommend only reading enlightened books or books from an enlightened person. Don't read anything else, because other than that it's filler and it's not complete knowledge. It's an interesting way to look at it. But yeah, being on the side of duality, knowing that your whole life is going to be stuck in there. I mean, God knows how many tennis games I've been in with myself from opposing views or philosophies or actions or thoughts, and then finding another angle to be completely opposite again in the same, and it goes on and on. And it's not a bad thing, because I think it teaches us the truth is always moving, and it's wherever you are, you can either find it or not find it. And you can continue always on the path of, oh, it's over here, oh, it's not here, now it's there, oh, it's not here, always looking.
Or maybe this is why there's a fear of change, because you're always wanting to cling to one, philosophy or one aspect of life or who you think you are. So this also creates insecurity about death, because you're not willing to develop that change. Definitely. It's definition of yourself. Like, if your life is continually changing, which it always is, we're not defining ourselves to allow that change to occur. But doing that, we may not access, can we say, the true self, or the path that we're supposed to be on, that we're naturally obliged to, because we're non-committal, due to the state of duality and trying to wrangle it that way. When really, I think it's very Taoist in the sense that you're always in it. There's the good or the bad, the up, the down, the in, the out, whatever you want to say. The duality is always there. The yin-yang symbol shows that very well. So where do we want to see life from? And whatever situation or circumstance we're in now, can we accept both parts and then choose from knowing both parts what the more favoured outcome is going to be? What's going to be better for me and these people, whoever the situation affects? Like, always knowing, no matter where you are, duality is there, because it's so sad and frustrating when people are in a crap situation and they think this is life now. Even though they've been here before and they come out the cycle, it's not that there's a problem with feeling sad or down or defeated, but it's like, this is how life is now. Because these cycles always come in one way or the other. It's never just going to be that smooth upward trajectory. So to become at ease with the light and the dark, the good, the bad, the in, the out, the successful, the unsuccessful, like all of it is life. And you're going to come back up at another point. It's a spiral. You're going to come back up. So don't worry where you are, figure out how to get out of the situation in the best way, or accepting what the situation is. It's like what people do with themselves. There's social media is easy format, or when you first meet people, generally you get all the good stuff, all the best stuff. You don't know anything else about that person. You don't know their fears, their pains, their guilts, sadness. You just get one side. And people, like on social media, we all do it anyway characteristically, but use just certain words and portray a certain image, and it becomes dangerous when we start to create that split of duality even bigger then, in the sense of, no, I'm not bad, or I don't have things I can work on, or the way I see life is exactly how it should be, and we don't have things that we don't want others to know. It's all that stuff that we have to embrace, the shadow work, the traumas, the pains, rejections, all those things need to be brought in, because you are them as well. And now we can say you're not anything because you're experiencing all these experiences, but to cover the base of it,
you have that experience going on, the good and the bad. So don't reject or ignore or deny or try to run away from, because that's what causes so much of our distraction, is we're trying to get away from that other side of duality, the darkness, the part that we don't want to admit about ourselves. And I can't remember, I think it was a Zen master, you know, but he said basically we've all got to eat and we've all got to shit, and it's like, even things like that, so don't talk about toilet, don't use certain language, or don't talk about sex or religion or whatever, and we're banishing off things that are a part of our human experience, and because of that we fracture even more duality, because we don't want to know, and if we do it's bad, and then if we've still got the image of bad as everything's terrible and it's going to be painful and dangerous and negative, we'll never fully integrate to a full human, we'll never become holistic, because we're separating sides. You are the good, you are the bad. Don't get hung up on either of them, just keep living. Keep releasing, keep being as authentic as you can by dropping the split of duality.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about that you mentioned there. 3 main things. Number one is when you mentioned that the swing between, you know, experiencing life's roller coaster experience. This is where in today's society, one of the reasons why suicide is so high is because, you know, you are living this life as a roller coaster. You're experiencing the highs and just getting so caught up in the highs that when the roller coaster finally comes down, you experience the lows as well, and then you're getting so caught up in the lows. And for people that experience more lows than highs, they ride on the low wavelength a lot more. They cling to that as opposed to clinging to the highs. I remember when I was going through my little phase when I was a teenager, any point I got to punish myself and say, well, this is why it's happening to you, and you know, you're worth this, I would latch onto that, and then that would cause more turmoil, and I'll put myself down even more, because there was a certain sense of satisfaction out of that came from punishing yourself, and through that you create this negative outlook of life, and eventually you just want to check out, and you feel as though, you know, life is just never going to be great for you, so you check out. Whereas opposed to someone that's done the opposite, where they've gone through the lows, but also they've experienced more highs. If you are doing the same thing in that aspect and latching onto the highs and almost feeling as though, you know, life can't be any better than it already is, you know, I'm enjoying myself and this and that, the single instant something bad happens to you that is quite life-changing, so a death or something that changes your life, again, you're back in that situation, that person that has experienced that low and has gone through that for quite a bit, has gone through. You immediately, you're fluctuating between one extreme to the other extreme, the waves and the troughs, and it's not a healthy way of living life. The healthiest way is, obviously they say the middle path is the healthiest way of living life, and I don't think people fully understood what that means, because it's so easy to say, oh, just don't be super happy when things are going great, and just don't be super sad when things are going bad, just take the middle path. It's so easy to say that, but then when you're experiencing, and that's the second thing I wanted to point out, is the fact that experience goes a long way. And it ties in with what we just mentioned previously about the past life and the karmas from the past life. I really have a lot of respect for people that have, for example, eaten meat for maybe 15 years of their life as they're growing up, and then decided that actually it isn't for me. You know, I've done it for this many years, I've experienced it, and I've decided that it isn't for me. Whereas someone like me, who's been brought up into it, you can argue that obviously I've obviously experienced that in past lives and gone through that process, but it's very much natural for me to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to pass on any meat. When someone says, would you like some meat? I'll just say, no, I'm vegetarian and it's just not my thing. So from that, there isn't really a direct experience unless you can somehow link it back to your past life and experience what you experienced in the past life, which many people can't because they don't have that full control of their life energies. But it's almost an innate sort of feeling that you get inside of you that tells you that this is wrong and this is right. So, but then it's also, for me, I've always said that I'm more willing to listen to someone, and again, you might be a different person, but I'm more willing to listen to a person that has experienced something and then said, actually, this path isn't for me, you know, because you can fully resonate with it because you understand that you get the context of what that person has experienced in this life to come to that conclusion that they don't want to participate in that activity. So going back to the meat, if someone has consumed it for a number of years and then decided that actually that path isn't for me, they can actually give a good, they can be the perfect sort of example for someone that wants to, or is in two minds whether to give up or continue doing it. Whereas someone that's not really experienced it really doesn't have that context. And the reason why I mentioned this is I felt the same thing when it came to the process of stretching. And I know it's gone in a completely different tangent, but kids that were flexible and they went through gymnastics school and then they were flexible as adults, or then as adults, cannot fully relate to someone that has been tight most of their life and then is only learning about flexibility when they become an adult. And it's a different experience to try and explain to them what flexibility and true relaxation feels like. It becomes extremely difficult because how do you describe things that you haven't even experienced before? So you haven't gone through the struggle that the other person has gone through. So for me, it's experiencing as much of life as possible, and that is one thing that holds us back in life. It's the fact that you're not willing to experience life in that level. And it might not be even a conscious thing, it might be a subconscious thing. So if I say to you, look, great, going climbing, you ask me how high is the wall, and I say it's about 60 meters. Your first immediate reaction, if you haven't done it before, if you're not into the sport, is actually, no thank you, I treasure my life. But then for me, it's like I treasure my life so much that I need to go and do this. And for you is I treasure my life that I don't need to experience it. And there comes a bit of a dissonance between the two sort of ideas. What is the correct way of doing it? Well, there isn't really a correct way, but I feel as though I would rather be the person that experiences everything, the highs and the lows in life, than be a person that just says no to so many things and just says, I'll pass on that, I'll pass on this. Because what usually happens is you'll get into a vicious cycle of just passing on every opportunity. Anytime you get that opportunity to do something that's slightly more uncomfortable for you or makes you feel out of place or insecure, you'll pass up on it immediately. And that's what we're teaching our kids in this generation. We're bringing them up and saying, well, this is what the result of experiencing this type of life is, and this is what's going to happen to you. So you almost create an insecurity in that person to say, actually, I don't want to experience that. And this is going to sound really controversial, and people are probably going to start messaging us about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it's a conversation I had with a couple of my friends that are Hindus and the kids that we're teaching. So we teach a group of kids that are between the ages of 13 to 18, and we're bringing up the new generation of kids. And I remember saying this, and I said it to the teachers, I didn't say it to the kids. This was a separate meeting. And I said, looking at what these kids are talking about, how their life is, I'm so glad that when I was young, I got bullied about certain things in my life, because through that bullying process, you start to accept what you feel strong about what you're defending. So for example, I used to get bullied about the symbol I used to put on my head when I was a kid, the Hindu symbol. And people used to ask me questions, and it wasn't actually direct bullying, it was just the fact that people were asking questions and I didn't really give them a proper answer because I didn't know the answer why I was doing it. It was just a very compulsive thing. So, and I said to the guys, like, I would rather have gone through, those years of bullying and experiencing that sort of friction from people than live a life where people are just saying, let's live in an environment where there are safe spaces everywhere so people won't question certain things and won't almost prod holes. Because the thing is, as soon as people start prodding, you start to really feel sure about how you feel about certain things, and you start to actually maybe even research or investigate more about the things that are causing insecurity inside of you. So if someone says to you, why have you got this symbol on your head? It made me want to go out there and learn why I was doing this, as opposed to just, oh, you need to do this from a young age. And for me, that experience is way more beneficial than living a life where you've decided not to surround yourself around that kind of crowd. It's so easy to say to people that don't surround yourself in a crowd that obviously is going to start pushing you around, whether verbally or physically, etc. Because then through that, there's no growth in that environment. All you do is you put yourself inside of a bubble wrap, and you make sure that when you're bouncing off people, it's a soft bounce. So I feel as though that's one thing that this generation of kids are going through right now. There is no resistance that they're having to experience, or there's very little resistance compared to what we experienced when we were kids, because that environment was different to the environment that these kids growing up in today's society. And tying it in with everything that we've just mentioned, it's the fact that you've decided to cling to one side of the dualistic nature of life. You've decided to take the safer option and never expose yourself to the dangers of life, which is a part of life. It is life. So when you go into nature and you see animals dying, that is part of life. When you see a young child has never experienced that, their reaction tells you everything. They're completely flabbergasted and just taken aback by what's happening in front of them. And that reaction shouldn't be it shouldn't be a reaction that should be happening over and over again. Once you've experienced that once, you should be encouraging these kids to see more of that and say to them, this is the other half of life that we're not willing to experience or we're not willing to acknowledge. So yeah, it's just, for me, it's a really deeply passionate topic, because I feel as though through having this environment where we're not acknowledging both aspects of nature, we are just, we're creating more problems for ourselves than solutions through that environment.
Yeah, we are. I think if you're not looking at the full equation, the whole picture, how can you form a true answer? What you believe in, if it's not been questions, or you can't see all of it. You're only going to get half of an experience, if that, through that position. And not only that, but what your expected answer is, how much that influences the rest of your life anyway. And if you don't have that full answer or the full sum, what are you basing it off? Where's the real truth coming from? Is it conditioning? Is it coming from other people? Is it what we want to believe? Talking to those who've experienced it, or changing your scenario so you can experience it, will give you truth, right? Or a degree of truth. And then where you want to go with that, how you want to use that to live is down to you. But to not be willing to question it, or having the people around us that will make them question it, we'll miss out on so much. To be able to appropriately handle those situations, for me at least, comes to that non-attachment of what this person says, or what their reply is, or how I feel saying it. You just got to let go of it to have a pure experience and to figure things out. So I'm not going to be resistant to what this shared opinion is. Let's see what this person has to say about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And you're just getting more eyes to your own experience, aren't you? You're getting a full picture going up and around, rather than just your one set, And the more people we can pull into, the more we can speak to openly and honestly, and not be afraid of what they will say, or not have any self-image behind what we're gonna look like when we say. Just pure development every time, no attachment.
Yeah.
But that non-attachment to wanting our beliefs backed up, or wanting the answer to be what we want it to be, or to try and resist death and ignore that it's there until it's too late, or we're told we're that old. Why would we pursue those behaviors other than selfish preservation? Because it's all about what I want or feel or know is right, and that's it, and everything else can go away. And that's living an illusion, isn't it? It's stuck in Maya. It's no, I'm not going to search elsewhere. I'm just going to sit with this, because this will get me through life and it will keep me protected and safe. That really ties into what Sadhguru says, that so many of us don't actually live. We don't live. We've just found these habits and routines to direct us and to control us, and to feel like we might be living a little bit, which we might be to a degree. But when there's so much out there, we have to have a mind willing to go and experience it, and to put itself out there, to be wrong, to not be attached, to not be so strongly identified, learning to use your characteristics to follow these experiences and find what your path is, but not demanding of it, not expecting it, not trying to tell life, or what you're saying about different levels of karma, or what occurs with death, as if we control it. We either ignore it or we don't look into it, because maybe we fear that it's beyond our control, and we have to give up so much of who we think we are, or what we think we are, and going, oh, there's something bigger than us here that's got mechanisms and routines of its own, beyond what our individual experience is. Life is doing its own thing, and it's bigger than us.
Yeah. So there's one key point that I want to talk about that you mentioned there: preservation. It's that obsession, that addiction towards preservation and preserving whatever you have in life. And it's like you said, the only thing that when death is calling, it's the one thing that you start to realize, actually, I can't preserve my own life. Forget everything else, I can't even preserve my own life. There's a story, and I'm probably going to butcher it by saying it, but I think it was Alexander the Great, when he was dying. I don't know if you've heard of the fable or the story about him leading up to his death.
No, I don't think
so there's three things that he did leading up to his death. So when he was dying, he told the people that are his spokespeople, or the people that advise him, his counsel, he said, I want you to get the best doctors in the world and bring them to me, and they're going to be part of my funeral. So they bring the best doctors in the world. The second thing he said is, when I'm dying, what I want you to do is bury me with all my gold and leave a trail of gold and all the riches I've owned over the years. And I want that to be my second thing. And the final thing is, when you're putting me into the grave, make sure my hands are open. And the reason why I want this to happen, and one of the council members was like, I get it, like, why do you want us to do this? Because you're dying. And said, well, I want all the doctors, the best doctors in the world, so then I can show people that it doesn't matter, you know, what doctors, how good these doctors are, they can't save my life when death is coming. And then he also said he wanted the doctors to carry his coffin as well, to show that they can't save his life. The second thing was the gold. So he wanted to show people that it doesn't matter how much money you have in the world or how much wealth you own, you don't take any of it. You know, it falls beneath you. And the final thing was he wanted his palms to be open to show people that he comes into this world alone and dies alone. And I was like, wow, that's really deep. And it's coming to that understanding exactly that there is no preservation of life. There is no preservation of, you know, trying to almost shy away from death when death is coming, because that's the only thing that's guaranteed. The moment you're born is the day that you die is already set in stone. You know, eventually you're going to get to that grave, or you're going to get into your own grave. It's just how you choose to meander to that point. Every single day you're aging, your body's slowing down, all these things are happening, and it's whether you acknowledge that this is happening, or whether you put yourself in this situation where in today's society we dress ourselves up in a way to look like we are youthful, because through youthful there is vitality, there's this sense of healthiness. But death is healthy, is the most healthiest thing there is out there. And we're not willing to accept that part of us. And by not accepting that part, you're basically a dead man walking, really, aren't you? Because you're not really truly living your life, you are just waiting for the day that you die. So yeah, it's really interesting, and it's something that we should openly talk about, because it is that one thing that it doesn't matter what kind of background you're coming from. So if you come from a religious background, even the Eastern side, like we rarely ever speak of it because it scares the kids. You know, it's something that scares people, but it's something that should be talked about, so then it doesn't scare people. Like, you know, one good thing that's come out of today's society, one of the many good things, one of the good things that have come out, is that we talk about sex very openly, but at the same time we've also exploited that. We've abused that ability to talk about it, and we've just gone through these different directions. But it should be the same thing with death. We should be talking about it openly. We should be preparing for our death, to be fair. We should be deciding how we want to die, because we decide how we want to live our life, right? We say, I want to be able to achieve this, and I want to achieve this and that, but we rarely ever prepare for our death, and we don't ever talk about how you want to die. And I think Sadhguru mentions it in one of his talks, and I think he also mentions it in his book, that they've already created him a grave in the Isha Foundation Center, that he knows exactly how he wants to die. He's also decided to not have a grave that's really deep, so he can walk to his own death. He said when he's dying, he doesn't want to have to get people to carry him. He wants to go to his own grave, climb down the stairs, and, you know, obviously lock himself up, so he knows that that's his time to go, as opposed to, you know, all this drama that happens. And again, it's an exploitation of an insecurity, where sometimes funerals are more expensive than weddings. And the thing is, at the end of the day, you are burning whatever you are buying. So the coffin, you either bury that, or if you're from the Eastern upbringing, you burn it. You burn the coffin. So it's almost like throwing that. And for me personally, that £25,000 that went towards getting you a coffin and all the food and stuff, just spend it on something else. You know, enjoy yourself and just let me die peacefully. One thing you pointed out that I want to talk about that's really, really interesting is in India, they would tell yogis to spend a large portion of their time, this was part of the yogic training, in a graveyard or in a cemetery, a place where people are burned. And people will ask, why the hell does a spiritual person want to spend his time at a grave where bodies are dying? And he said, the reason why we do this is we acknowledge how brittle the physical body is. So when you're watching someone who's been cremated, the first thing that goes, the first thing that burns away completely is your neck. It's the softest part. So the head falls off. So your body's getting burnt. If the head is not placed properly, what will happen is once you're burning the body, I think it's if the fire is continuously burning, I think it's 72 hours or something before the whole body's fully decomposed. But the first 9 or 10 hours, if you this is when the relatives tend to disappear after the first 3 or 4 hours. But if you sit there and watch, you'll see that the first thing that will go is the flesh around your neck, and then this is the softest part of your body. So the neck will be burnt and the head will just fall to the side. So what Sadhguru said was when he was young, when he spent his time at these places, these cemeteries, where people were being burned, the dead bodies were being burned, he would actively pick up a head and put it back into the pyre. So, and that's something that would be really traumatic for most people. You know, you're picking the skull of your dead relative or your dead ancestor. And for people, that's really traumatizing. But he says in an environment where there is death, the only thing that can happen is you appreciate death as opposed to being fearful of it, because you've seen death, you've understood it, and you've seen what death is. So you can now come to terms with the death when it happens to you in the process. Because whenever I don't know if you've ever seen a body being buried or been part of that process, but in Hinduism, when someone dies, you do spend a good portion of time around that dead body with the coffin open. So you're seeing this happening, and it's quite interesting in the West. I didn't know they did this until I watched The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, and they dress up the cadaver. They put makeup on the cadaver, make sure that the face is not all drained, because obviously 72 hours after a person's died, all the body starts to do all these weird things, and the body decomposes, and all the flesh starts to, you can see the life being drained away from the face. So what they would do is they'll put makeup on the body and make it look as though it's just someone sleeping. And I found that really bizarrely traumatizing, the fact that you are even masking the aspect of death when the person's already gone. You know, so it's almost a slap in the face towards death to say that actually, we rather present this person as a person that looks as though he's sleeping as opposed to a person that's dead. And I was like, this is insane that we do this. And it's the fact that we just don't acknowledge death as being the process of life. And without life, there is no death, and without death, there is no life. So it's understanding that aspect of it and not masking it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think how we celebrate death or see it can transform those experiences. It is funny, isn't it? This person's old, they're dead, let's paint them up a little bit and give them a nice
makeover.
Rock to be buried in. Yeah, a makeover. You know what, I was watching there's a show called Midnight Gospel on Netflix,
yeah.
Duncan Trussell. And he's talking, I can't remember which episode it is, it's one of the later ones, and he's talking to I can't remember what the lady did, but she was talking about the makeup on bodies, on dead bodies. And where it kicked off, and she was telling this story about how it was in America, one of the early wars, and they would bring like the trucks with loads of dead bodies on, and it was the families, so the wife or the daughter, or whoever would, if somebody died, they would wash them, prepare them, and sort of get on with it from that. And somehow these bodies, they started to use chemicals and substances to preserve the bodies to get them back. And then the whole business sort of took off from there. From what this episode was saying, is that they would then not just preserve the bodies from getting funky, but that's when they started the makeup to present them a certain way, and then make them smell a certain way, and then he just started to charge for this service. And it's like, wow, it's mad. There's money to be made everywhere, isn't there? If you're dying, it's going to cost you. If you're getting married, you're dead in your house, yeah, government will take some of that, it's going to cost you. It's crazy. I mean, maybe there's more reasons going on. It makes sense why it's around other than...
But it sounds like an exploitation.
Exploitation does.
Literally an exploitation of something.
I mean, what you just said about how much you pay for a coffin, why don't we have some form of renewable surface for it, and a renewable system, or whatever the coffin's made of, like a cheaper wood or something, whatever, because it's been burnt in a minute. Do you know what I mean? But I think what's tied with that is this feeling, or the thought more so is, no, this person deserves the best, because they died and they were a great person, and all this stuff when we fantasize about how great people are when they're gone, even though maybe they weren't. And again, because we've got associations with death and it's gone, so you have to see things a certain way. And there's so many links there, have their clutches in how we think about certain things and develop perspectives. But yeah, even to pay for death, like, I'm just gonna go sit in the forest, you know what I mean? I'll dig a little hole and I'll sit there by a tree. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would have no problem if that was the case. I love those ideas of those renewable sort of coffin seed things. They bury you with like a seed, and then that seed takes your nutrients, so the tree sort of develops with you in a way.
So you go into the earth.
Yeah, I think they put you in the root, in a tomb sort of thing, underground. But you know, things where your body's being used, it just makes sense to me. You know, burn it, get rid of it, just don't bury my corpse, like, unless it's being fed to something, because it's just going to be a lump of matter, isn't it?
So the body is interesting. Eastern philosophy says the body belongs to the earth because you're built of the elements or the aspects of life, which obviously belongs to the earth itself. So you're lending it, you're renting the body, so the spirits enter the body. So what you should do is give it back at the end. So give it back to the earth, and you'll become part of the earth, and you'll feed 1,000 generations from the soil, decomposed soil. So yeah, the other thing I want to point out is the prior birth karma. It's quite interesting. So he talks about people that have untimely deaths. So someone might have been healthy and suddenly gets run over by a car or something, or suicide as well. Suicide, he goes into really full detail. And he says that what happens is, the reason why you've taken this birth is you've got karma to pay off. So the good karma is great, but it's the bad karma that you're here to pay off. So when something bad happens to you, what usually happens is people shy away from it, or they become depressed and say, why is bad things happening to me? It should be the other way around. You should be happy with the fact that these bad things are happening to you, because according to the Eastern philosophy, you're paying your debt. The prior birth karma that is bad, that you've accumulated, you're paying it in this lifetime. So once you've run out of that, that's when life is done for you. That's when you die, when you've run out of that. So you've given everything, you've paid off all your karmic debts, it's time for you to move on. Now the people that die prematurely, or get run over by something, or something happens to them that you unexpected, or suicide. What happens with suicide is that when you kill yourself and you've still got prior birth karma still there, you come back. So you've lost your physical body, but you stay. You maintain your energetical body. So this is the experience of ghosts. So it's been interesting because I've been watching ghost videos for the last week or so, just scaring the shit out of myself at 12 o'clock at night. And I was really fascinated by the process, and I was talking to my mum about it. And she said, yeah, it's just like in India, if you don't see a ghost, you're a weirdo. Like, we see them all the time. I'm like, how's that possible? Because in this side of the world, they don't believe in ghosts, and people say it's just a weird phenomenon. And she was explaining it to me. She goes, yeah, we had situations where when we were riding on bullocks with our fathers or grandfathers, a ghost will just sit next to us, and we would almost shit our pants, and we'd be like, look, there's a ghost sat next to you, and there's a certain thing you should do. And Sadhguru really goes into detail, and he mentions it in the book that he normally doesn't talk about a topic like this, but he needs to bring it up because it's part of death. So when you've got prior birth karma that you haven't paid off, and you've gone immaturely, or you've taken your own life, or something bad's happened to you, you've still got debt to pay off. And depending on, this is why Hindus always cremate the body. So you're burning the physical body, you're also burning the energetical part of the body too. So that person can now finally move on to the next life. When you can't move on to the next life, or you've taken your life prematurely, you've lost the body, yes, which is your physical essence, but you haven't lost your energetical essence, which means you come back as a ghost. Now, ghosts are interesting beings because they don't have the ability to be conscious. So whatever they do is out of compulsion. So let's say if your addiction was in life to, and he mentioned this, you're someone who likes to pinch people or make people laugh. So what you will do is, as a ghost, you will come back, and that's your trait, that's your compulsion. So what you will do is, in an environment that you're haunting, your haunting ability is that you make people laugh, or you laugh at yourself. And this is where people can hear, little kids laughing, or people crying. It's because this is one of your traits, your compulsive trait that you have, and that is the most expressed trait that is happening when you're this entity. So yeah, it's really important for people to pay off their entire debt before they leave, because you still have to pay it off regardless. You either pay it off in this lifetime, or you come back in the next lifetime and you pay it off. But because you've got your energetical body still alive, let's say you've got another 20, 30 years of your life before you should have actually got there naturally, and you've died prematurely. Well, unless you've been you've died in the proper ritualistic way, and the body's been disposed of in the proper way, you're going to stay in that entity in your energetical self, and you're going to accumulate those years as that energy itself. And I found that really interesting as a way to explain the paranormal phenomena that happen. And it's like, well, that makes a lot of sense. But you also mentioned that most paranormal activity can't actually harm people. They just don't have the ability to harm. Yeah, they may play jokes and practical jokes on you, but in terms of directly harming a human being, there are very rare occurrences when a paranormal being, especially when it's a ghost, can harm you. The poltergeists and all these other beings are separate beings completely. They're entities that have taken on traits of a particular animal. So he says that if you get bitten by a snake, sometimes you take on the essence of the snake, or the spirit of the snake engulfs you. So when you die, and you've died through that process, you take on those animal characteristics, and this is where the poltergeist activity comes in. So yeah, I just found that really interesting. I'm just like, this is insane, because when we were kids in India, we were taught this right from the start, and we just thought they were just like fanciful tales, but it was experiences that people have been going through. And I would say, obviously a lot of people now live in cities in India, but most people in rural environments have already experienced these sort of paranormal sort of experiences happening around them. So there's that one way of experiencing or understanding that aspect of life, which is beings and entities that exist beyond the realm that we can see. Because we know that dogs and babies are quite sensitive to them, and they can sense them straight away. But adults generally can't tend to experience them unless they are doing things for us to see. So yeah, it's really interesting, that aspect of life as well. But it's just based on the fact that you've got karma that you haven't paid off yet, and you've died in a really premature way that you're still having to pay for it unless you get rid of the energetical aspect of the body. Yeah.
So these layers of karma, or maybe categories, is an easy way that I would try and understand them. Are they all being used at separate times? So let's say you're dropping bad karma from a past life, you can still be accumulating good or bad karma for your current life as well? Yeah.
So this is where the three separate karma come into place. So you've got the sanchit karma, which is the banked karma. Whatever you've done in your past lives, it might take you another 3,000 years, or the birth that you've taken 3,000 years to experience maybe an aspect of that sanchit karma, the one that's been banked. So like, you might have £10,000 in your savings, but you might not want to use it right now. You might want to use it 20, 30 years down the line. So it's exactly the same concept. The Kriyaman karma is the karma that you're producing right now, and it's either going to affect you in this lifetime. So for example, I don't know, if I'm feeling generous today and I buy you a sandwich or something, that's karma. Regardless of whether you think it's generosity or not, it's still karma accumulated. So in some form of way, you need to repay that. You might not repay it towards me, but you might now buy someone else some food, and then that way you've paid off your karmic debt. So you've done that part. So then that part will be stored for the future births, and it's the same thing with any other thing. So it could be extreme, where you might take someone's life by accident, so then that will need to be paid off in future lifetimes as well. Or it might be something very simple, like just like you're paying for someone's food, or you're paying for someone's fuel, etc. So yeah, and then we've got the prior birth karma, which is a karma that's you've accumulated from the past life, and it's created this current situation you're in right now. So you've been given the body, you've been given the birth, you've given the parents, you've been given your current situation based on what you've done in the past life, and it's just coming into fruition now. So you might have like fortune in the future, or you might have negative things that are going to happen to you in the future lifetimes, but in this lifetime you've been given this situation and this aspect. But it's woven in such an intricate way where it's very difficult for you to specifically say this is what your path is, because it's mentioned in his book that people were destined to have long lives and do amazing things, but they've died prematurely, and that's because of doing certain things that have caused them to die prematurely. So for example, if you're a climber and you're climbing all the time, and you decide that one day you're going to climb without a rope, and there's a chance that you're going to die, you've taken your life prematurely. So that has to be all taken into consideration. So yeah, this is why Eastern astrology is massive. Like, they go into detail in terms of positioning of the stars, positioning of the planets, and what will happen in terms of the correlation between the positioning of these planetary alignments. But then they can't explain when people automatically just take their life or they die spontaneously. So there's certain limitations that are set in stone. So there's certain things that are set in stone, but there's also certain limitations that are not set in stone as well. So for example, you might decide to become a monk, so then you don't marry the partner that you were chosen to marry. So you've just completely changed your karma completely, and you've taken on a different path. So there's that aspect as well.
So it's like fate is your destiny, I suppose, isn't set.
It's loosely there, and it's whether you choose to take that path, or whether you choose to veer from that path. So yeah, it's like any situation from any movie or book. The destiny is there. It's whether the person decides to take that path. And if you decide not to take that path, then maybe not in this lifetime, but in the next lifetime you'll have to take that path, unless you pay off that debt.
Yeah, so there'll be karma that will be accrued from that, from your choices.
Yeah.
Which is good as well, so people can't sort of put the feet up and just go, oh, I'll let life sort it out. You have to be a participant in it as well and be active in it. What do you think is the easiest way to explain what karma is?
That's a good question. I would say, so the Western interpretation of karma is bad things happening to you if you do bad things. That's one interpretation. But karma, I would say, is also the other side, which is good things happening to you if you do good things. That's the best way I think you can really explain it to people. But yeah, I think that's the best way to explain it to people. And it's knowing that just because you are destined or you've got fortune happening to you, so you might be brought up in a rich family, with parents that are wealthy and everything's going perfectly for you. But you can either decide to spend your parents' wealth and, abuse your way through life through doing that, or you can have the balls to say, actually, I also want to be in control of my life and I want to have my own career and do this and that. So it's exactly the same concept with karma, which is you can either ride the wave and do nothing at all and just kind of let your life go on by and not really achieve anything or not help anyone else out, but which just means that in the next lifetime you're going to do the same thing again until eventually you decide, actually, I want to get out of this environment and experience life itself. So it's a good way of also realizing that when people say, when they get to, 80, 90 years old and feel as though they haven't achieved everything in life. Well, you haven't achieved everything in life because you can't achieve everything in life. It's too much, which means that you've got other lifetimes to experience that aspect of it. And this is one of the reasons why it's said that, and I think Sadhguru explains it in the form of bubbles. Some bubbles will burst like that, and some bubbles will have to grow big until they finally burst. So it's the same concept. You've got to experience more life for you to grow your consciousness and your awareness. And in that lifetime, you might be a monk or a yogi because you've got more experiences from the past to relate to that have created this environment where for you, maybe the brahmacharya path is the right path for you, or maybe for you, the householder path is the right path for you. But because you've already experienced it multiple times in the past, you no longer have to satisfy that a part of you. So there's that aspect as well. But yeah, cool. I think that is a great place to wrap up because you've got a client in about 15 minutes.
I do indeed. Really good description, man. It's really, really good view on karma. I like the action-reaction sort of view, that your action is going to produce something else. It also ties in with, was it Lao Tzu's or the golden rules is treat others how you yourself want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can sum living up in the karmic philosophy with that. Because even our intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We don't actually know where that intention can lead up or take us. But if we're doing things as compassionately and as aware as possible, knowing that your influences on the situations and the people and the life around you will be impacted, just leave it in as much a loving state as possible, but truthful as well, moving forward in your own truth to discover who you are. With compassion.
Yeah.
You've got a good navigational tool.
Plus there's debt all the time, so someone might do something great for you, but understand that you'll have to pay it on to the next person or to that person again. And you might have those situations when you're aware of this process, when someone does something good for you and you don't get the opportunity to repay them for them doing that, you might consciously catch yourself out paying for someone else's services and realize, actually, look, I'm paying back my debt that I was owed. So the best thing you can do in this life is anything good that happens to you and you feel as though, I feel as though I'm privileged to be in this situation, pay it back and do something to help someone else out, because it's owed to you, but also you owe that to someone else. And I think in that way you create an environment where everyone is just compassionate and helping each other out. So yeah,
it's a lovely way to see it, man.
Yeah, perfect. Right, so this was podcast number 19. I'm hoping I'm getting the number right. This will be on Instagram as a preview. It will be on YouTube as a video, and as always, you can listen to us on Spotify if you don't want to see our pretty faces. Right, Craig. It's been a fun one, this one.
It has, man. Yeah, it has.
Right, we will see you in the next one, guys.